I was bullied into making this video, so here we go, starting with 3/4 cup of warm milk. When I say warm, I mean no higher than 110 degrees because you don't want to kill your yeast. After that, you go in with 1/4 cup of granulated sugar and 2 teaspoons and about 1/4 of yeast. We're going to mix that. And then we're going to add in our eggs. 1 whole egg, 1 egg yolk. This butter should have been melted, but it had been sitting on my stove. And so I just used that, mixed it together, and I sat it back near the stove. And I leave my stove on so that the yeast can have the opportunity to rest and begin to activate. And so I didn't bother too much about the butter. It was soft enough to mix in with the other ingredients. Now, if you haven't guessed yet what we're making, or you don't know already, we're making homemade cinnamon rolls. Because again, I was bullied into making this video, and here we are. So we're just going to keep on mixing this. I really wanted to make sure everything was incorporated together, and I was also breaking down that butter. Next time, it'll be melted, I promise. It didn't change the recipe. It didn't make it bad. It didn't make it different. None of that. This is what it looks like once the yeast starts to begin to activate. I also added, so what I just added to my wet batter was 3 cups of bread flour and 3/4 teaspoons of salt. Now, I've been doing this for quite some time now, so usually I'm good at eyeballing my measurements, or I listen to my ancestors, whichever comes first. Honestly, if you're not comfortable with that, don't be comfortable with that, especially with baking, because if you don't get it right, you can mess up the entire recipe. I say, if you're new at this, if you're a beginner, please measure out all of your ingredients. I also use a scale sometimes, because that's just simpler. Measure everything out in grams and the recipe will come out perfectly every time. Now, if you're not super fancy and you don't have a scale, measuring everything is perfectly fine. Just make sure you follow the directions. Now we're going to lightly flour the surface, because what we're going to do is knead the dough. Y'all better say hey back. That beautiful artwork I gave to y'all. Now, after you say hey back, because if you know the rules, if you in my house speak, it's the polite thing to do. You're going to knead the dough for 8 to 10 minutes. I never go over 10 minutes. I usually just do the 8. With this dough, it usually comes out very sticky. And usually I don't add the full amount of flour that's necessary for the recipe, simply because I know I'm going to add flour continuously over the 8-minute kneading process. Now, you guys are not going to watch me knead dough for 8 minutes, because I'm not going to show you me kneading dough for 8 minutes. It was painful for me to do the first time. I promise y'all don't want to watch it. But like I was saying, lightly add flour every so often, just so this doesn't happen, because it's going to stick. It's going to stick, but eventually you'll get to a consistency through the kneading process where you can tell that you've added more than enough flour. It's not going to continue sticking to the surface, and you can knead it to its desired kneadability. Let's make new word. That's the new word of the day, kneadability. Now, I just asked Alexa what kneading the dough does, and it creates the structure of the bread. It creates the structure. It also forms gluten and other stuff. So I'm learning too, guys. I may do this very well, but there's still a lot of things I don't know. And this is the exciting part for sure, learning. Now, some of you may ask, can you do this in a stand mixer? You sure can. I too own a stand mixer. I never use it. And a lot of that is just I'm making content for you guys, but I also love how my bread comes out, whether it's croissants, whether it's biscuits, whether it's cinnamon rolls, whether it's donuts. When I knead the dough by hand, it always comes out, I don't know, better. I'm not sure why. I don't know what goes into the science behind it, but I prefer to knead my dough by hand. So this is about what it should look like after you knead it for about 8 to 10 minutes. And my surface is not always the smoothest, but I know the texture that's necessary for this process. And so I go ahead, insert it back into the bowl that we mix everything up in. I've already greased it. I'm going to add saran wrap to this. and I go over it with 2 layers. And like I already mentioned before, my stove is on and I like to leave it at like 350, 400 degrees. The top of the oven is going to be hot just because it's releasing that heat from the oven. It's circulating that heat. It's going to release it from the back of the oven. And so that's going to make the top of the oven warm. It's going to make the sides of the oven warm. I sit this right on top of my oven and I let the dough rise. What you're trying to accomplish here is twice the size. So you want this to at least double, and that's going to take about 2 hours. Give or take, it might take an hour, it might take an hour and a half, 2 hours at the absolute most. And if your dough does not rise, it's because there's something wrong with your yeast. So always be sure before you buy yeast to check the date, because if it's no good, then it's not going to work. Or if you kill it because the temperature of your milk is too warm or your melted butter is too hot, nothing over 110 degrees, it will kill your yeast. Now that we've had that lesson in yeast, let's get to the filling. 3/4 cup of brown sugar. I want to say this was 2 to 3 tablespoons of butter, which I went back and added more simply because it was just not spreadable. It wasn't spreadable enough. It was super thick and really hard to spread. And so I went in, added some more butter just so that it would spread properly across the dough once it was time to roll it and roll it. And you'll see what I mean in a second. So after you get all of this mixed up, you have time. Again, I went in and added a little bit more butter. I'd probably say add another 2 tablespoons just to be on the safe side. Yeah, you're either going to want it softened or want it melted. Now, let's get into the dough. That's what you're looking for in size. Double the size. Once it's risen. Once it's risen, you're going to deflate the dough, lightly flour your surface. You're not going to need a lot of flour for this, and you're not going to need a lot of pressure for this. The dough is doing what it's supposed to do. I lightly flour my surface and I lightly flour the top of my dough because of the rolling pin. Now, don't get lost yet. Follow me, right? So I'm going to roll it out just a few inches across, and then I'm going to rotate it and roll it out again. Now, there is no definite shape that I'm going to get right now. The goal is not to necessarily shape it. It's just to create enough surface area so that when I go to spread on the filling, it'll fit in. Watch what I do to shrink my dough back down to size. Now follow me. You're going to need to roll this in a rectangle shape, but it's not always going to be accomplishable. With this, I knew I rolled it too thin, 1. And then 2, I knew that in order to roll it, I needed to shrink the dough back. So watch how I shrink this dough. All I'm going to do is grab the corners, grab the edges. Remember, it's not going to stick because I floured my surface. And it's just going to shrink back down to size. And the goal is to pull the sides so that the dough itself shrinks back, and also I can shape it into that rectangle shape. And I'm just using my hands to go over it. I'm going to use the rolling pin to go back over it just to make sure that it's even on all sides. This does not have to be perfect, and you're not going to use all your dough. 9 times out of 10, you're not going to use all of the dough that you make, and when you go to cut it, it's not going to be even on the ends. Not always. Now, you could be a perfectionist about this if you want to. I am not. I'm not going to do it. Nope, not. But that's just me. It still came out amazing. Now, take your filling, add it to the middle of the dough, and you're just going to spread it out at this point. Now, the goal here is to spread it out evenly and to get to the edges and the corners. And not necessarily all the way. I'd say leave about 1 inch, maybe half an inch of room, just so that it doesn't start leaking out of the sides, because once it starts to leak out of the sides, it creates a mess. But this is the consistency that you want for your filling. You don't want it to be too buttery, like you don't want it to be liquidy, but you also don't want it to be too thick because you're not going to be able to spread it. At that point, it would just rip your dough. So this is the perfect consistency. All right, yeah, we did kind of fast forward to the end. So there's about 1 inch, half an inch, about half an inch. I don't know how long 1 inch is. That looks about 1 inch to me of space left to leave out the edges, if you will. And so you want to make sure that you're rolling this tight. The goal is to roll this as tight as you possibly can because you have to be able to hold in the filling. If you roll it too loose, all of your filling will leak out. Ask me how I know. Don't worry. I'll tell you. I've done it before. I tried this recipe probably maybe 2 years ago, and I couldn't figure out why it wouldn't stay together. And it was because I rolled my dough too loosely. So y'all know how y'all be rolling them things. I know y'all can roll a tight one. Don't come over here playing this shit. I know how y'all get down. Play with somebody else. Play with your mama. Don't play with me. All right. So you saw me get rid of the ends simply because we're not going to use it. The shape is out of whack. It's really just the ends, and you're still going to get 8 large cinnamon rolls out of this. And I did make 8, and I ate 2. Well, I didn't eat 2. I ate 1. But the point is, you will get 8 out of this. I scored them where I wanted to make the cuts, and I sharpened my knife before I did this. People always say you can use dental floss unflavored. I don't have unflavored dental floss, so I don't use that. I just sharpen my knife and go at it. It still creates the perfect shape. I'm not worried about it at all. After we get these out of the way, then we're going to go ahead and add them to the pan. And make sure if you are using a knife that you're just cutting all the way through, because you don't want to mess up your dough that way. Sometimes I'll be like, damn, you're not tired of talking? I am. I just looked down to see how long I've been recording, and it's been 11 minutes, and we still got about 9 more to go. Anyway, I've already greased my pan. Again, we're going to let the dough rise one more time. I put it in just glassware. I love IKEA. For those who don't know, it's my fave store. And so that's what I'm using. Their dishware. Me and that cinnamon roll we had to have a powwow because it I don't know, it was aggravating me, but they got it together real quick. Yes, they go by they, them pronouns. Thank you. Plastic wrap. We're going to add more plastic wrap because we're going to let this rise. What again? Bet. 2 layers. It keeps in the warmth of the I guess the heat that radiates through the glassware from the stove. It keeps the warmth inside. And so I double plastic wrap it just to be on the safe side. And I'm going to set that on top of where the stove. That's what already on. Beautiful. Now, let's do the cream cheese icing because baby, what's a cinnamon roll without icing? A waste of my time. That's what it is. Extra icing, please. Thanks. We went in with vanilla bean paste, and I also used vanilla extract just because I don't know if it's the paste I got. I mean, it is organic, but it's just not potent enough. So, hey, double trouble, baby. Go in, add your butter, and yes, the same thing I did with the filling, I doubled up on this recipe. I did a stick of butter, a little less than a stick of butter. I used the whole block of cream cheese, which is 8 ounces. I did about a tablespoon and a half of vanilla extract, and I combined all of this together, and then I went in with my powdered sugar, and I want to say I used about 1.5 cups of that, and that is for the icing that goes on top of cinnamon rolls, obviously, when they come out of the oven. Now, once you get everything mixed together, mix. Okay, anyway, once you get everything mixed together, then I went in, I added my sugar again. All right, there we go. And I sifted in my sugar just because sometimes it creates lumps, and I don't like it lumpy. And so I just go ahead and sift it just to be on the safe side. I was making a TikTok, so if you are concerned about the mess, this was also recorded for a TikTok. If you haven't checked it out, you probably should. You know where my TikTok is, and if you don't, thank God, because I think more than enough people see me on a day-to-day basis. Now, once you have your powdered sugar sifted, then you're gonna what? Mixy. Good job, guys. You're learning very quickly. Now, you're going to mix this, and no, you're not tripping. It will combine. You just got to keep on mixing. Why do you think we do arm day every day? There's a reason why. Now, the cinnamon rolls look like this once they rise. You're going to let them rise for another like 45 minutes, hour and a half at the most. Now, here's the secret weapon. You're going to go in with the heavy whipping cream. I don't have a measurement for this. I just go in where there's holes in between the cinnamon rolls, and I add the heavy whipping cream. What I'm going to do is move it side to side, though. I'm just going to tilt the pan a little bit, move it side to side so that it can get underneath all of the rolls. And yeah, just, you know, coat it a little bit on the underneath, on the bottom of it. And we're going to do the same thing to the second pan. I don't know why I cook like there's a village. Like, I make so much food every week now because I'm content creating so much, right? And I just keep asking myself, like, who's going to eat all of this shit? Like, at some point, I'm just going to have to start packing shit up and being like, hey, first come, first serve. I'll overnight it. I got a 6 count right here. Meet me at the cribbo. Like, something has to give because I don't know what I'm going to keep doing with all this food. Like, I have no idea. Maybe I'll start like feeding the homeless or something in my neighborhood or like in my area, because all this food for what? Okay, I'm done ranting. Here's the moment of truth. I know. They look absolutely amazing. What do I do except for my big one every time? And then, of course, while they're hot, because you got to do it while they're hot, go on with the icing. And y'all see that big ass clump of cream cheese in there? I am not happy about it. It's fine. It'll melt. But you got to do this while it's warm. You have to, because it's going to melt, going to be ooey gooey. Oh my God. Jesus. Why do y'all think I work out twice a day? This is why I have to work out twice a day. It's not, I mean, yeah, granted, I'm trying to lose 50 pounds by my birthday, but really, in reality, it's because I'm not going to stop cooking like this. I'm making bagels at some point this week. If I have the time before I leave to go out of town this weekend, I'm making bagels. If not, that's the first thing I'm doing next week. So I'm going to keep going to the gym twice a day so I can keep eating like this. Anyway, we almost to the end of this, and y'all know I'm gonna let y'all see what the pull apart look like. Ooh, babe. Nom, 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 nom. It was so good. It was so good. I'm looking at my fingers right now because it was so good. Listen, if you try the recipe, let me know in the comments. If you try the recipe and you do it right, let me know in the comments. And yeah, tell me, thank me now, or whatever Drake said. I'll see y'all next time.